And thank you everyone for coming out tonight. COVID times is having us do our outreach a little bit differently this year. And while I would love to be seeing you all at a winery or a brewery in the area, this will serve just as well. So tonight we're going to be talking about the incentive programs available for working lands. And this may be a review for some of you. And I hope that you'll take home some new tools in your toolbox to accomplish some of the projects you might have in mind. And I'll start with just a quick overview. Here at New Jersey Audubon, we're part of the Delaware River Watershed Initiative. It's a multi-state, multi-organizational effort to protect and conserve water quality within the Delaware River watershed. So to reach our goals, we've teamed up with a number of nonprofits, local, state, and federal government agencies to share our goal in protecting natural resources throughout New Jersey while creating wildlife habitat. So through programs and outreach like this tonight, we're hoping to reach additional customers to expand our reach and include practices supporting a suite of wildlife species while protecting water quality and building soil health. So here in southern New Jersey, our focus is in the Kirkwood-Cohansey Aquifer. It's a surficial aquifer which has groundwater and surface water closely tied together. So some of the major threats are drawdown and contamination. So I wanted to give a brief overview of some of the practices that support these goals, followed by an introduction of our Healthy Land and Waters Grant program. Then we'll jump to some NRCS programs and conclude with John Park's talk on his work with the Working Lands for Wildlife. So the first way that we can protect our aquifer and our watershed at large is by reducing aquifer overdraft by using water smarter, upgrading irrigation systems to improve efficiency. So there's a picture here of a center pivot system that works with drop nozzles to deliver water very close to the crop surface. Through this system, less water is lost to the atmosphere and it avoids displacement of water. And if you compared it to hard hose irrigation, you're going to see an 85% efficiency upgrade in delivering irrigation where it's needed the most. Of course, you can switch to micro irrigation by using drip systems to irrigate your crops, and that comes in at a 95% efficiency rating. And we work with farmers to couple this with irrigation water management, where producers closely monitor their water usage, including records of volume, frequency, and application rates. And this produces a site-adapted plan tailored to their conditions. Another thing we want to focus on is increasing groundwater recharge by increasing infiltration. This can be attained by tillage reductions. So reduced tillage and adding a cover crop in your rotation would provide additional benefits, which are very far-reaching. A cover crop prescription can help in breaking pest and disease cycles, building biomass, and building up organic matter. So on the most basic level, cover crops protect the watershed by keeping the soil surface covered year-round, which reduces runoff and provides living roots to feed soil biota all around the year. It helps to hold soil particles in place and reduce compaction, erosion, and runoff. When coupling cover crops with no-till or minimum till systems, we can substantially increase soil health by limiting soil disturbance and runoff potential. Reduced tillage increases pore space and water holding capacity. It promotes less fuel consumption, less passes over the field, and ultimately can provide less inputs over time. We've been working with producers to identify also odd areas of their fields that either might not be as productive, therefore the inputs that they are using to farm this land is just not providing any cost benefit. So we've been promoting resting some areas in permanent cover for a number of years. Native plants, when we use them in these ways, further encourages groundwater recharge because they have very deep fibrous roots that build soil health. And the added benefit, of course, here at Audubon, we're excited about providing additional habitat for beneficial insects and pollinators. Another goal is to reduce inputs and pollution to waterways. So in agricultural systems, runoff can be exacerbated through stormwater runoff, but it gets even worse when nutrients are tied to those soil particles that run into waterways. So in reducing suspended sediment and erosion, we include practices that maintain, again, the soil biota that bind soil particles together. We briefly spoke about equipment upgrades, reducing passes, and leaving crop residue on the ground to protect the soil surface from, believe it or not, rain droplets that can really displace soil particles and run off into nearby waterways. We also work in livestock management practices to include manure management systems, stream crossing, and access control fencing that keeps livestock out of waterways. So reducing direct inputs through waste. And we also promote prescribed grazing practices that bring additional water quality benefits. So maintaining a vegetative buffer along waterways can help filter out sediment and nutrients from overland flow before entering surface waters. Additional benefits provide food resources and cover and escape for wildlife. So just having this buffered edge that wildlife can escape from, and it may be an intensive operation, but also providing that buffer between the water and the land. They can be herbaceous or woody. They can be a mix of both, but they should be tolerant of flooding and saturated soils. So to plan practices like these, we really like to look at the site history, current land uses, and select the most beneficial plant material to be used. So not only will these act as a filter, but they can also contribute to stream bank stabilization, and in the face of climate change, additional carbon sequestration. And of course, enhancing wildlife habitat on working land. So here's a couple of the practices that we look at to get that added benefit over time. Hedgerows and windbreaks can be enforced with native shrubs and trees. Critical area plantings, again, is reducing any runoff potential and erosion, and vegetated waterway buffers. I just went over some of those. These practices can directly benefit at-risk wildlife species. And by carefully planning each practice, we can do our part to create a mosaic of suitable habitat throughout the communities that we serve. Conservation practices can all serve a dual purpose in increasing the availability of resources to pollinators, migratory songbirds, and other animals. And this is just a short list of practices in which we can do that. So again, John's going to talk about some more of these later on in his Working Lands for Wildlife portion of his presentation. That was a very quick overview of some of the practices that we really support through our programs. And it is no means an exhaustive list either. But really excited to talk to you tonight about our South Jersey Healthy Land and Waters grants. These come to us through funding with the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and some help with the DEP. We have a couple of pools of funding that we can pull from to fit different practices and projects throughout the southern part of the state. The OG Healthy Land and Waters grant, which started back in, I guess, 2014, is focused in Salem and Cumberland counties. We can provide technical assistance to farmers interested in some of these soil and water conserving practices, and especially those interested in putting wildlife habitat on the ground. So we're looking really at the Salem and Cohansey River watersheds for where we can provide financial assistance, but we can work with producers in any area of the southern part of the state, really statewide, to provide technical and planning assistance to reach their goals. We also work very closely with the USDA. I am a partner employee with the Natural Resources Conservation Service and sit in the Vineland Service Center on a part-time basis working with NRCS staff on conservation planning. So we really do a lot of sharing of customers, and there may be a project where, you know, the cost is just so great and maybe funds from other programs don't quite cut the mustard in covering the expenses for that project. So those are great opportunities for us to team up and contribute a little bit of additional financial incentive to get that project on the ground. We accept applications all the time on a rolling basis. In working with NRCS, we have kind of tailored our program to fit some of the NRCS practice standards, which we go by. We've worked with some USDA staff to produce some ranking criteria where we'll take a look at all of our applications at once, see which ones have the best benefit for the watershed, and then we fund kind of going down the list. So we have plenty of financial assistance monies available. So if you are interested in participating in this program, I would definitely encourage you to reach out to us. My contact info is right here. It'll be back again at the end of this slideshow, and you can reach out. We also got the application posted to our Audubon website, so the link is available there, and most of the service centers down south also have access to this application. So if you are a producer working with NRCS and you want to pursue this option, just check in with your district conservationist and they can hopefully get you set up and in contact with myself. But we're very excited to bring our Healthy Land and Waters grant back to our home county of Cape May County. We worked here in previous years and just received funding to continue some work along the Cape May Peninsula. The goal in this portion of our funding cycle is to continue to build soil health and water quality practices by working with farmers and landowners to achieve wildlife habitat benefits along this peninsula. So if you're not aware, Cape May County is part of a major flyway. It's considered an internationally important birding area where thousands of migratory songbirds and breeding birds pass through the peninsula every year on their migrations north and south. We have a little bit of an invasive species problem here in Cape May County, and so we're going to be working with a lot of landowners to renovate existing landscapes, get rid of those invasive vines and shrubs that do not quite provide the benefits that native plants would do, and get some more native habitat on the ground. And this we'll be doing in conjunction with further promoting cover crops, residue management, pollinator habitat, and filter strips. And we also are going to be partnering up with Cape May Bird Observatory to engage the public through educational opportunities, including a couple of opportunities for a bio blitz where we can go on the property with the landowner's permission, of course, to do a kind of preliminary survey of what kind of species are around and then check back in after practices have been established. We're also going to be working with landowners through this program to create a speaker series that will exist through Cape May Bird Observatory. Don't know how that's going to look in the age of COVID, but hopefully we'll get some folks together to tell their stories, learn some landowner history of the area, and just get everyone involved and hyped up about conservation. So that's the project here in Cape May County. We also are working through grants to promote bog turtle habitat. So in areas of Salem County, there are quite a few emergent wetlands that may be supporting bog turtle life. And by the way, bog turtle is just named the state reptile of New Jersey, which we are very excited about. We have a pilot project where we've been monitoring a population for the last couple of years and enhancing habitat there to both expand the suitable habitat and make it thrive. So although bog turtles are rare, they are federally threatened species. They're often associated with farmland and pasture land. Having bog turtles on your property is opening a suite of opportunities, especially for funding. And with a few tweaks, we can really make this habitat exceptional for the bog turtle and create some more habitat for them. Surprisingly, turtles and livestock get along very well. Grazing cows out in a wet pasture, particularly through prescribed grazing, can actually enhance the habitat by keeping wetlands open and protecting the herd during the wettest times, getting them off the ground when it's really wet. So through this program, we can not only help with livestock fencing and stream crossings, keeping those cows out of waterways and keeping them in the wetlands or enhancing the wetlands through that way, and managing invasive plants and vegetation. So this is another opportunity, and there's a lot of opportunities that exist through NRCS to manage for bog turtles as well. But we're excited to bring this project to Salem County as well. And finally, our Atlantic White Cedar project is about to kick off here in the southern part of the state. We're looking at the Rancocas Creek watershed and Morris River watershed in Cumberland County. And so if you have Atlantic White Cedar stands on your property, we can help with restoration and enhancement. Atlantic White Cedars historically dominated the landscape with over 115,000 acres throughout the state, but today we're down to less than 40,000. So it's really considered a globally rare habitat type, important both ecologically and culturally, can help to purify water sources, and supports threatened and endangered species throughout this, these habitats. Reasons for the decline of the Atlantic White Cedar habitats were large. They're very attractive timber species, but improper management, changes in land use and development, and also overabundant deer population have threatened them, and more recently saltwater intrusion. You see these species kind of just large stands of dead snags due to that. And so all of these factors are leading in their decline. So our goal is to work with private landowners to restore, 70 acres of Atlantic White Cedar habitat, and also work with 30 acres of adjacent uplands to conserve and promote best management practices throughout the next 2 years. We have funding for this project. And this is in complement to the state's initiative, which are working towards an ambitious goal of restoring 10,000 acres of cedar in state lands over the next 10 years. So we can do things like assist with forest stand improvement, deer fencing, directly planting to repopulate this species, prescribed burn management, and forest stewardship plan development, which is a huge factor in getting some of this work done and is a big part of some of the forestry implementation work that we do through NRCS. So I'm going to switch gears here. That's kind of a broad overview of our Healthy Land and Waters Grant Program, and talk to you about some of the NRCS programs that are available. So if you don't know the acronym, it's the Natural Resources Conservation Service. They serve private landowners nationwide in conserving natural resources on working lands. Again, I mentioned I'm a partner employee that assists in conservation planning and implementation. Many of New Jersey Audubon's programs were designed to work in conjunction with NRCS's practice standards and provide additional incentives to shared customers. Funding is provided through the Farm Bill and provides a number of programs to eligible producers throughout the U.S., but here in New Jersey, we have a number of offices to serve you. There's no minimum farm size or farm income to work with us at NRCS. All participation is voluntary and non-regulatory. Your plan remains your plan and will not be shared with anybody without your consent. You would work with a conservation planner to identify resource concerns by evaluating our favorite acronym, SWAPA: soil, water, air, plants, animals, and human objectives. So we're really considering a whole suite of species of concerns here that could be affecting anyone on their production land or forested land. So you'll work with a planner to identify any problems and opportunities on your land with your objectives in mind. The planner will walk the land with you to identify resources, and we have access to tools to analyze data, formulate alternatives, and together make decisions about what practices would be best suited for your property. And there's going to be a lot of resources, websites throughout this presentation, which Lindsay is going to share later on. We can share these slides so you have access to them. So don't worry about writing everything down real quick. A conservation plan we call a living document that outlines conservation practices to be implemented on your land. Again, you're working with your planner to identify what is important to you. So all of those poll questions answered earlier today, whether it be saving money, conserving water, or supporting livestock practices, those plans can be tailored to your needs. Again, non-regulatory, so if there is something that might be out of compliance on your ground, NRCS is not bound to reporting any of that, but they will work with you to point something out and say, hey, there's a way that we can fix this and we may have money to help. So the conservation plan is going to provide you with aerial photos, access to your soils maps and soils descriptions, wetlands layers, and then provide a schedule of operations for you to address these issues or opportunities on your land. I think a great part about working with NRCS is the access to specialists that are on staff. So soil scientists can come out and do a closer look at maybe some issues that you're having in a certain field. There's engineers and irrigation specialists on staff, livestock and grazing specialists, and biologists such as myself that can help with some of these specialized projects. There's also a suite of technical service providers that are available to write plans. So we talked about having a forest stewardship plan written, maybe a grazing plan or nutrient management plan. These can all be accessed through the assistance of NRCS. So if you're interested in working with them, again, always here to provide technical assistance, and you can also apply for financial assistance programs. There's really an alphabet soup of programs available, all wonderful acronyms that we know and love. However, your planner will work with you to find the program that best fits your project. So similar to the Healthy Land and Waters grants, applications are accepted at any time during the year. However, they are batched and ranked at certain times, typically in the fall and winter. So the program sign-up cutoff has not been announced yet, but if you are considering a plan for the next year, we encourage you to get an application in as soon as possible so that we don't miss you this year. It does take almost a full calendar year to get a plan together and executed. Put together for execution, but plans can last up to 5 years. And most financial assistance programs are competitive, so you will be ranked against other folks in the state. And so your planner will work with you to kind of mention what might be a more competitive practice, or you know, how to better rank out in certain situations. So I mentioned there are many programs through NRCS, but the flagship program we call EQIP, the Environmental Quality Incentives Program. So there's a couple of eligibility points to be eligible for this program funding, and they're not so bad. You have to have control of your land for the period of your practice schedule, which again could be up to 5 years, and knowing that the tax dollars are there to benefit those in need. You have to meet adjusted gross income provisions and comply with highly erodible land and wetlands provisions. The final step is being willing to adhere to a schedule of operations. Again, it's one that you're producing with your planner, so hopefully something that you feel comfortable with. But the benefits are great. You can actually get paid to do this work on your property. It costs you nothing, but you can collect some payments as a reimbursement once your project is implemented. So just for an example, these payments are paid per unit. So cover crops in 2020 paid $44 an acre. In most cases, they come as a reimbursement, but if you are a socially disadvantaged or limited resource farmer, you're actually eligible for an increased payment rate. So if you identify with that group, you would, for cover crops, collect $53 an acre. So just a little bit of an added benefit. And then keeping in mind that the Healthy Land and Waters grants can actually assist as well with these costs. But it's all a great benefit to getting more conservation on the ground, especially for cost savings. And if you're a limited resource farmer, you're eligible for upfront payments. So you can actually get up to 50% of the cost share in advance of putting the practice in. So that further helps get that conservation on the ground and reduces your costs for the project. Perhaps the best part of working with NRCS, besides the wonderful folks that work there, is access to specialists and partners. So one of the things that us at Audubon really enjoy is helping out with the operations and maintenance. So NRCS is going to provide job sheets and step-by-step instructions on how to achieve your goals. They'll provide seed lists and tags and folks to contact for help. And we can also come in and check in on maintenance, maybe provide some funding for that work, and assist in troubleshooting and implementation in some cases. Part of our Healthy Land and Waters grant is that we have access to some volunteer corps that could come out and assist with some habitat practices. So that's just a nice added benefit of kind of the partnerships that we have going on here in the state. So the first step is finding your service center. There is a service center assigned to every county within the state, and here's a little graphic to see kind of where you would land. John has the contact info listed for everyone at the end of this slideshow, so make sure you write down the number and give them a call. Due to COVID, we're no longer having in-person applications accepted, but hopefully one day that will change. So make sure you give them a buzz, and you can also access a number of resources online. And I already talked about the partnerships, but just to mention one more time, partnerships make more possible. And one more thing I just wanted to add with the projects and programs through NRCS and the ranking, we have local work groups where we actually meet with farmers every year to understand what are the biggest resource concerns affecting them on their ground. And so those resource concerns are equated with practices that actually rank a bit higher. So we really are interested in hearing from folks in the agricultural community and private landowners to tell us how we can better serve our constituents. And a nice list of helpful resources we'll leave here for you later on. The program applications are online, service center, contact information. There's also a conservation planning worksheet, which you can print out and just kind of get your thoughts on paper as far as how many animal units you have, what's your crop rotation, to help us kind of see where you're at and understand your operation a little bit better. Lots of info about pollinators and working lands, and soil health and the web soil survey. So definitely, if you get a chance, check those out later on. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mr. John Park to talk with us about the Working Lands for Wildlife program.
Well, thanks, Brittany. Hi, everybody. John Park from Jersey Audubon. You know, what Brittany was talking about with a lot of the NRCS programs, you know, there is a lot more that you can do with wildlife through the EQIP program and some of the other ones, for not just the 3 species that we're going to talk about here, but keep it in mind because bog turtle in particular, it's not just the southern species, that's statewide. So don't think you're limited just because we looked at only a couple species here. So Working Lands for Wildlife is part of the EQIP program, but it's a special pool of funding. and it concentrates on 3 species: the golden wing warbler, bob white quail, and black duck. And what I like about these programs when we talk to the general public about it, entering them, is that the programs themselves, even though we're focused on these 3 targets, target species, they kind of benefit a suite of species. You know, these guys are kind of the umbrella species where all these other things kind of fall underneath it. And when you consider New Jersey, and I don't know how many people really get this, but New Jersey, we're loaded. I mean, loaded with wildlife. If you compare Alaska to New Jersey, Alaska has about 102 species of mammals. We have 90. They have about 150 or so species of fish. We have 400. They have about 150 different birds. We got about 460, 470 at this point. And when you compare, think about this, when you compare that Alaska is about 75 times bigger than New Jersey, we blow it out of the water when it comes to biodiversity. In fact, per square, what's the thing? It's per square, yeah, on a per square mile basis, New Jersey literally has more species than any other state in the nation. Think about that for a second. When you consider the infrastructure that's here, you know, we're the most densely populated nation, state in the nation. That's unbelievable that we have this much going on. And when you literally break it down to where those species are left and where they are in the landscape, a lot of this comes down to the fact that thank God for the farmers, thank God for the woodland, you know, landowners, because they're the real stewards of the land in all of this. Without them doing the conservation work that Brittany was talking about for general crop production or soil erosion or the buffers and all that, a lot of this habitat that we're talking about would not be here. So the Working Lands program is kind of neat because it kind of sets out an entirely different pool of funding that if this is something you would like to try on your property and you meet those requirements, those eligibility requirements, you know, not only are you helping that target species, but remember, it's that suite of species, all of those things that happen that are here and make New Jersey special, while also taking care of a lot of the natural resource concerns, soil, water, that we talked about before. Britt, next slide. So the first one we're going to talk about, I realized though, looking at the poll, I know there's only one person up in North Jersey. Hi, Bia. And I'm really going to go through this one pretty quick because for the South Jersey folks, this one really doesn't apply. This species, the golden wing, its range is pretty much up here in the northwestern corner of New Jersey. The species itself, that beautiful little bird with the golden cap on it, again, it's an umbrella type species. When we do habitat work with farmers and landowners for this particular bird, it requires a lot of forest management. If you have forests, you know, and you have a forest stewardship plan, that kind of thing, this is where this would kind of fit into. But remember, if you're a southern or central Jersey landowner, although you might not qualify for this because the range is up north, don't think that you're not eligible for EQIP funding for forestry work for species, because that is an eligible practice throughout the whole state. Okay, it's just that this particular one is very specific for that bird. But when you think about that you're eligible for those practices that we're talking about across the state, if you're doing forest work, I've listed literally all the different things that NRCS can provide technical services, right? Give you the guidance, write you the plan, help you out with it. But also what we're here for is to learn how to submit an application for consideration to get funded for a lot of these things. I know plenty of people down South Jersey, especially in the Pine Barrens, that have forest stewardship plans. And the reason they had them in there in the first place was for maybe not just timber management, but also for fire reduction, fuel oil reduction, that kind of thing. That's the kind of stuff we're talking about. So to this audience that we're talking to here, I'm kind of breezing through Golden Wing because I know that we only have one person that's up north, and that person's very familiar with this particular project. Next slide. Good old black duck. Yeah, this one just got added to the list of species about a year or so ago. And it's kind of funny to me because, I mean, we're talking to a lot of landowners and farmers and hunters and everything. You kind of forget that you take these things for granted. You don't even realize that they're on the decline. These species that we're talking about today, they're not listed as a threatened or endangered species. The reason that they're listed here is that there are ways that we can save these things by creating the habitat and doing these practices to keep them off the endangered species list. They're trying to get ahead of them. So when we look at black duck as one of the target species for working lands for wildlife, again, a lot of the actions I listed up here and the available practices, but the region here for black duck is a lot larger. It's more or less state-wide. My favorite thing about this one is, the next slide, Britt, is that it really comes down to creation of wetlands or maintaining wetlands. A lot of times in New Jersey, I'm sure you all know, is that throughout history, wetlands in particular were modified for agriculture. And we've lost a lot of that wetland habitat, but we've also lost not just the habitat, but the filtration that goes along with it, the biodiversity that goes along with these things, and all those ecological services that those wetlands give us, clean water and nutrient management and all that. When they're tried to plant into on a farm and they're not really reproductive, this is a particular program that can help out to get those areas that were modified for agriculture back to a functional wetland. I love this picture because this is a property up in Warren County that NRCS funded to do a wetland creation. This field used to be a cornfield that was saturated year after year after year. The production was low or to non-existent. And ultimately that landowner worked with NRCS to bring back this beautiful wetland. And again, black duck might be our target, but it serves, by restoring a wetland like this, a whole suite of other species utilize these things. And that's amazing. I've even had it where we've done work with farmers and landowners to create these different types of habitat to the point where the farmers or the landowner, but especially the farmers, recognize that people love to come out to see a working farm. If you can incorporate the wildlife aspects into it, there's chances for ecotourism and agritourism. And I've seen that up across the state working with different farmers, that when you do stuff with NRCS and you fix that resource problem, and if you're able to attract other things to it, it opens up a diversity for not just the wildlife, but also to educate people and bring them into the farm, and also recognize again how important farming is for the region. All right, next slide. This one, the Bob White, is something that is extremely interesting here in New Jersey. Bob White, when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s here in Jersey, they were all over the place. You used to see them a dime a dozen down in South Jersey, okay? But over time, they kind of just winked out. What I mean by that is they disappeared. They've been extirpated from the state. They actually have a listing what they call functionally extinct, because it's very difficult to determine if there's even a wild bird left in New Jersey. It's a combination of thing between a lot of habitat loss from development. It's also different farming practices got way more efficient, and those weedy spots at the edges kind of now we're in production. You can't blame the farmers for this because they're just trying to, make a living. And when you lose those little areas like that, well, you start to lose species. one of the things that New Jersey Audubon started to think about and working with Division of Fish and Wildlife was, is it possible that you can take birds, wild birds from another state, bring them back to New Jersey and try to restart a population? It was a translocation project. We worked on it for about 6 years with the partners you see up here. We did it down in the Pine Barrens, where we were doing a research project to bring birds up from Georgia, wild birds, put collars on them, track them at a site, see what they do, see what they utilize, and then basically start to look at what habitat management needed to be tweaked in order to get these things back on the landscape down the line. Next slide, Britt. The cool thing about the project was there was success, meaning we actually did show that you could take birds from southern latitudes, bring them up to the north, and they do survive. There's some caveats with that though, in that as good as this project was to show that you can do that, the bottom line is we didn't create a new population. All we did was prove that it could work. Next slide. The real thing here is we need landowners. We need landowners in South Jersey, Pinelands, Delaware Bay Shores. We need them to work with us and NRCS, take advantage of these programs that are there to get this kind of habitat back on the landscape. Like I said before, a lot of these programs have dual benefits, meaning we're doing work for quail, say, but if you look over here on the slide and you look at some of the actions that can get funded through NRCS, a lot of that is, again, tied in with fire and forest management. The things that maybe as a landowner down in South Jersey, especially in the Pine Barrens, that you've already been doing already, where you're looking at your forest and you either have a forest stewardship plan or you need a forest stewardship plan for your tax assessment, your woodland tax assessment or farm assessment, or even if you're worried about wildfire and you are putting in fire breaks or you're thinning the trees. All of those things help with establishing the right habitat for quail. If you're able to get funding, which is what we're talking about here, and work with NRCS to do the things that you were going to do anyway, or in this case, you would tweak them to make them good for the bird, good for the natural resources, it's worth taking a shot at it. It doesn't cost anything to apply for these funds. If anything, you start to develop a relationship with NRCS and those experts that are on that staff to really start to figure out how to work your lands to benefit a lot of different things, not just your tax assessment, but actually putting stuff on the landscape to benefit the bigger picture. Down in the Pinelands, obviously, and when you start to think about out west and what's going on with the fires out there, the Pine Barrens can easily be the same situation. We've seen it over the last couple of years with smaller fires, 12,000 acres here, 8,000 acres this year. The reality is that fire management can be done by fuel load reduction. And when I say that, that is doing prescribed burning, thinning certain stands up, and those practices can get funded under these programs. And at the end of the day, you wind up with a healthy forest, a lower chance of wildfire, but also habitat for some of the most rare species you can possibly think of, and our target species here, the quail. Next slide. So with that, we're going to kind of wrap this up and then take questions and answers. But as Brittany said before, these are the phone numbers. This is the slide you want to take the screenshot of, because more or less this is the direct contacts for NRCS and those service centers, but also 3 people you need to know: Brittany, myself, and Austin Damager down in the Columbus the service center. And Austin works there with Quail Forever and NRCS, because we can help you navigate through some of the stuff that NRCS has, but we also, as Brittany pointed out before, have a lot of companion grants where if some of the funding doesn't work or doesn't fit, or you might not even be ranked and you might not get funded on NRCS, talk to us, because you will find that we have other options for you, either through Partners in Fish and Wildlife or a grant that Audubon has or what Austin has. It's worth knowing and worth calling just to find out if there's anything else out there or how to walk through these these programs. Because it can be a little daunting when you first see the paperwork, but the reality is, at the end of the day, it's so worth it. I was in consulting for about 16 years before I started working for Audubon. If I had known that these services were for free and that there was expertise in every possible way you can think of for managing your land at no cost, I don't know how, I don't know what I would have done, because it literally is something that is such an easy resource that I don't think a lot of people even realize is out there or available to them. So take advantage of it. Start your relationships if you're a farmer. If you haven't done it already, talk to these folks. Look at the programs. The money that you receive goes a long way. It's not just for your land, but for the whole state. That's all I have. So, questions on any of this from our audience?
Thank you very much to our presenters for sharing that information. Yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat or in the Q&A section, and I will read them. Another option is to unmute yourself at this time, and you may need to, depending on how this is configured, you may need to request that you get unmuted, and I would be happy to approve that. So I'm just gonna wait and see if anyone has any questions. And while we're waiting to see if any questions come up, Brittany had mentioned this, but I will send out an email with the slides from this presentation so that this contact information is available to you. Eventually, the recording of this webinar will also be available. I will try to get that done as expeditiously as I can. But I just wanted you to have the contact information sooner rather than later. So the first email out will be with the slides and not the recorded version. I don't see any questions from anybody. So it's possible that you've answered all their questions. Yeah, any last chance? And
I guess the one last thing I'm going to throw out there is, although that deadline has not been confirmed, do it sooner than later if you're thinking about these programs, to call one of us or one of the service centers, because it's going to happen soon. And if you don't want to miss this opportunity, get on it as soon as you can, because it will happen very soon. Okay.
great.
Well, thanks to everyone for coming. Like John said, give us a buzz and we would be happy to direct anyone further.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you.